Welcome to our talk about environmental protection. So this basically is going to be a talk about externalities. Remember, in the last chapter, we talked about market failure due to market power. So remember, the free market is supposed to do one thing, and it's supposed to be more efficient than other economic systems. So if the free market system fails in the efficiency evaluation, it fails as a system. In other words, it's not doing what it's supposed to do. And three sources of market failure that could cause inefficient outcomes are market power, public goods, and externalities. This chapter is all about externalities. And so this is the way you're going to look at it. So let's say we have two market participants. And this circle is basically the market. Well, these market participants use prices to communicate. So if this is a demander and this is a supplier, the demander uses price to convey value to suppliers. In other words, if they're willing to pay a high price, they're telling suppliers, hey, I really like this, give me a lot more. If they're saying, I don't want to pay a very high price, I don't like it very much, you don't have to give me that much. Suppliers convey costs to demanders. In other words, when the price is high, that's a way of suppliers saying to demanders, hey, this cost me a lot to produce, therefore I need a high price to cover those costs. So you can see how prices are used to communicate between demanders and suppliers. Well, what if there's a third party here outside of the private market? This is the private market. What if there's a third party who's experiencing some sort of benefit or cost associated with this market transaction? In other words, if this person is incurring some sort of cost, let's say, I don't know, this person is being harmed in some way. In other words, a cost is being imposed upon this person because of their transaction. Well, that means prices are not reflecting all costs. That, in other words, this cost is external to the private market. Therefore, this price is not conveying all information. Or what if there's a benefit that's being generated? In other words, this price is not representing all benefits associated with this market transaction. So this is the visual I like, because this tells you that there's some sort of cost or benefit that's external to the private market. Let's get rid of some of this stuff, Okay, go away. So for example, pollution impairs health, reduces life expectancy, and reduces labor force activity. And pollution could come from a market transaction. So if price does not include all of the costs associated with pollution, that means that cost is external. So smog is one of many types of pollution, right? There's acid rain, there's again, nitrous oxide, which produces smog. This generates what we call the greenhouse effect, which is one of the causes of global warming. And this is having huge impacts around the world. Aside from air pollution, there's water pollution, right? Some people feel that hydraulic fracking may be causing water pollution. And then there's organic pollution. This could come from farming. It could come from, human activity, disposing of human waste. Then there's thermal pollution, is an increase in the temperature of waterways brought about the discharge of steam of heated water. There's even light pollution, right? Solid waste pollution, we just talked about that again. So in other words, there's lots of pollution that can cause significant environmental and human damage. And this won't go away unless we pay somebody to clean it up. Now, economists can estimate the dollar value of damage by assessing the economic value of lives, forests, lakes. Now, some of these are very difficult to assess the value of, right? For example, assessing the value of lives is a very tricky thing, but please understand, if you cannot assess a price, it's very difficult to figure out what to do. If you don't know what the cost is, how do you know how much resources to allocate to correct for this market imperfection? So it's difficult to measure the value of intangibles like lost views of sunsets, polar bears dying, things like this. Now, the Environmental Protection Agency estimates that over 95% of current air and water pollution could be eliminated by known technologies right now. In other words, we don't have to wait for a breakthrough in science to fix the damage caused by market activity. We have the capability of doing it right now. It's just an issue of paying for it. Now, market incentives play a big role in polluting behavior. So for example, businesses seek to maximize profit. They don't seek to minimize environmental damage. And they maximize their profit by producing a rate of output where the last unit has a marginal revenue equal to its marginal cost. That's how profits are maximized. And this is a production decision that may go against environmental considerations. So the efficiency decision requires a producer to choose that production process that minimizes costs. And again, this could go against the environment. So the efficiency decision does not lead to low production of pollution. Pollution abatement can be achieved, but only at significant cost increases to the producer. So you can see there's an incentive for the producer to avoid cleaning up because they can avoid costs. Because remember, these costs in most cases are external to the market. That's a fancy way of saying the producer isn't paying for these costs. So the behavior of the profit maximizer is guided by comparisons of revenues and costs, not the philanthropy or aesthetic concerns of the welfare of the environment. So let's take a look at this. This is a supply and demand for a perfect competitor. And here you can see the marginal cost curve right here, right? This is the flat demand curve, which is also the marginal revenue curve. And they produce a rate of output where MR equals MC, and that's this point right here. And this determines their rate of output, 1,000, and the price being charged. Now, if there is an external cost, that means this marginal cost curve does not reflect all true costs. There are some costs being paid by a third party. Well, if these producers were forced to realize those costs, the marginal cost curve would shift upward. And that's what you see here. You see here the marginal cost curve is shifted upward. Well, if this is the true cost curve, if this is the true cost curve right here, we have a new MR equals MC, and that's going to be right here, which leads to a new rate of output, which is below 1,000, right? And in this case, the same price. So can you see here, this is a very good example. With an externality, the market produces 1,000. If the externality is internalized and producers are forced to realize the costs that they're imposing on third parties, they'll voluntarily produce less because it's costing them more to produce. So again, this is an example of a market failure. An external cost or externalities are a market failure because they lead to inefficient outcomes. So in the next video, we're going to be talking about externalities, mainly in on the production side, but that's for our next video.